Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are watching this from. Welcome to Pigeon Healthy. Today we're going to talk about something that most pigeon keepers have never heard of, but it might just change the way you deal with parasites in your birds forever. Before we start, if you're new to this channel, this is where we talk about keeping pigeons healthy using completely natural methods. No chemicals, no synthetic medicines, just plants, herbs, and natural remedies that actually work. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's get started. Today's plant is called wormwood. Now I know what you're thinking, wormwood? What kind of name is that? It sounds strange, it sounds old-fashioned, maybe even a bit mysterious. This plant has been used for generations in traditional animal care, but somehow in the world of modern pigeon keeping, it's been largely forgotten. And that's unfortunate because wormwood is one of the most researched natural antiparasitic plants available. Wormwood is not some exotic plant that you need to order from halfway across the world. It grows naturally in many parts of Europe, Asia, and North America. In Turkey, we call it pelinotu. You might have seen it growing wild on the side of the road, in abandoned fields, or even in your own backyard, and you just didn't know what it was. It's a silvery green plant with deeply divided leaves and a very strong bitter smell. And that smell is actually an indicator of the active compounds inside. The botanical name for wormwood is Artemisia absinthium. It belongs to the Asteraceae family, which also includes daisies, sunflowers, and many other common plants. Wormwood is a perennial herb, meaning it comes back year after year once established. It typically grows between 60 and 120 centimeters tall. The leaves are grayish-green because they're covered in fine, silky hairs, which give the plant its distinctive silvery appearance. The flowers are small, yellow, and appear in late summer. But for our purposes, we're interested in the leaves, which contain the highest concentration of active compounds. So let's talk about what wormwood actually does, and why it's effective against parasites. The main active compound in wormwood is called thujone. There are actually two forms of thujone, alpha thujone and beta thujone, and wormwood contains both. There are also other important compounds like absinthium, which is what gives wormwood its incredibly bitter taste, and artemisinin, which you might have heard of because it's used in antimalarial drugs. Then there are various flavonoids, phenolic acids, and other terpenes. Now don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with complicated chemistry. What you need to know is this. These compounds work together to create an anti-parasitic effect. Research has shown that these compounds can affect parasites in several ways. First, they interfere with the parasite's cell membranes. Think of a cell membrane as the outer wall of a house. If you damage that wall, everything inside becomes unstable. Second, they affect the parasite's nervous system. Many intestinal parasites have simple nerve structures, and the compounds in wormwood can disrupt their normal function, essentially paralyzing them. Third, some compounds have direct toxic effects on parasite reproduction, preventing them from multiplying. When you combine all these effects, you get a powerful natural anti-parasitic action. Now, I want to be very clear about something important. Wormwood is not a miracle cure that will solve every parasite problem instantly. If your pigeon has a severe, life-threatening parasitic infection with significant weight loss, severe diarrhea, or signs of systemic illness, you need to see a veterinarian immediately. Severe infections may require fast-acting pharmaceutical interventions. Natural remedies like wormwood work best for prevention, for managing mild to moderate parasite loads, and as part of an integrated approach to parasite control. They're a tool in your toolkit, not a magic solution. Parasites are one of the most common health challenges in pigeon keeping. It doesn't matter if you keep racing pigeons, show pigeons, fancy breeds like fantails or Jacobins, tumblers, homers, or just backyard birds for enjoyment. Parasites don't discriminate by breed or purpose. The most common internal parasites affecting pigeons include roundworms, which are also called ascarids, hairworms, which are technically called capillaria, and various protozoal parasites like coccidia. Each of these can cause problems, and often pigeons are infected with more than one type at the same time. The symptoms of parasite infections are fairly consistent across different pigeon breeds. You'll typically see loose or watery droppings that may be greenish or brownish. The droppings might lack the normal white urate cap, or the urates might be yellowish or greenish instead of white. Weight loss is common even when birds are eating normally because the parasites are consuming nutrients or damaging the intestinal lining so nutrients can't be absorbed properly. Birds may appear less energetic, less interested in flying or moving around. The feathers may look dull, rough, or ruffled. In young birds, growth may be stunted. In breeding birds, fertility and hatchability can be reduced. In racing birds, performance drops noticeably. The challenge with parasites is that they're often not visible to the naked eye until the infection is quite advanced. You might not see actual worms in the droppings until the parasite load is quite high. That's why prevention and regular monitoring are so important. Many experienced pigeon keepers do routine fecal tests. especially before breeding season and before racing season, to check parasite levels even when birds appear healthy. Catching a parasite problem early makes it much easier to manage. Now let me explain exactly how to use wormwood for your pigeons. I'll go through this step by step so you can follow along easily. First, you need to source your wormwood. You have three main options. Option 1 is to purchase dried wormwood from an herbal shop, health food store, or online supplier. When buying, make sure you're getting Artemisia absinthium specifically. There are many species in the Artemisia genus, including mugwort, which is Artemisia vulgaris, and tarragon, which is Artemisia dracunculus. While these other species have their own uses, absinthium is the species most studied for antiparasitic properties. Look for organic dried wormwood if possible to avoid pesticide residues. The quality can vary significantly between suppliers, so it's worth finding a reputable source. Option 2 is to grow your own wormwood. This is actually quite straightforward. Wormwood grows well in most temperate climates. It prefers full sun and well-drained soil. In fact, it tolerates poor soil quite well and doesn't need fertilizer. You can start it from seeds or from cuttings. Once established, it's very low maintenance and quite drought tolerant. It spreads slowly, so it won't take over your garden. You can harvest leaves throughout the growing season, but they're most potent just before the plant flowers. Growing your own ensures you know exactly what you're getting and how it's been grown. Option 3 is to harvest wild wormwood if it grows in your area. However, this requires caution. You must be absolutely certain of your identification. There are look-alike plants, and some plants in the same family can be toxic. If you're not experienced with plant identification, don't guess. It's not worth the risk. Also, only harvest from areas you know are free from chemical sprays. Roadsides are often sprayed with herbicides. Agricultural areas may have pesticide drift. Look for wild areas, nature reserves, or abandoned land where chemicals aren't used. And always harvest sustainably, taking only what you need and leaving plenty for the plant to regenerate. Once you have your wormwood, you need to prepare it properly. The standard preparation method is an infusion, which is basically a strong tea. Here's the detailed process. Measure out approximately 2 tablespoons of dried wormwood leaves. If your dried wormwood includes stems, remove them and use only the leaves as they contain the highest concentration of active compounds. If you're using fresh wormwood, you'll need about 4 tablespoons to compensate for the water weight. Fresh plant material is about 70 to 80% water, so you need more volume to get the same amount of active compounds. Place the wormwood in a container. Use glass or ceramic, not metal. Some plant compounds, particularly the tannins and certain volatile oils, can react with metals like aluminum or copper. This can reduce the effectiveness of your infusion and potentially create unwanted compounds. A glass measuring jug or ceramic teapot works well. Boil water and measure out 1 liter. Pour the boiling water directly over the wormwood. The hot water is necessary to extract the active compounds effectively. Stir briefly to ensure all the plant material is wet. Then cover the container. Covering is important because some of the beneficial compounds are volatile, meaning they can evaporate with the steam. By covering, you trap those compounds in the liquid. Let the mixture steep for 15 to 20 minutes. This timing has been found to give the best extraction of active compounds without extracting too many bitter compounds that make it unpalatable. If you steep for less than 15 minutes, you won't extract enough of the beneficial compounds. If you steep for more than 25 minutes, it becomes excessively bitter and some birds will refuse to drink it. After steeping, you need to strain out all the plant material. Use a fine mesh strainer, a piece of cheesecloth, a coffee filter, or a clean cotton cloth. Strain it carefully and make sure no plant particles remain in the liquid. Small particles can cause problems if they're ingested, potentially irritating the crop or getting stuck in the digestive tract. What you're left with is a dark greenish-brown to yellowish-brown liquid. Depending on the quality of your wormwood, it will have a very strong, characteristic smell that's bitter, slightly sweet, and quite pungent. This is your wormwood infusion. Let it cool completely to room temperature before using it. This is important. Never give warm or hot liquids to pigeons. Their crops and digestive systems are sensitive to temperature, and hot liquid can cause crop burn or other thermal injuries. You can store this infusion in the refrigerator in a clean glass container for up to 5 days. After 5 days, the potency starts to decline, and there's a risk of bacterial growth, so it's better to make fresh batches. If you want to prepare larger quantities, you can freeze the infusion in ice cube trays or small containers, then thaw as needed. Now let's talk about how to actually use this infusion with your pigeons. There are 2 main approaches depending on whether you're using it for prevention or for treatment. For prevention purposes, which means you're using wormwood to help keep parasite levels low in healthy birds, the protocol is as follows. Add 100 milliliters of your wormwood infusion to 1 liter of fresh drinking water. This gives you roughly a 10% solution. Mix it well. Provide this mixture as the drinking water for 3 consecutive days. During these 3 days, this should be the only water available unless you notice birds refusing to drink, in which case you should also provide plain water. After 3 days, return to providing plain fresh water for 11 days. Then repeat the 3-day cycle. This gives you a pattern of 3 days on, 11 days off. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening wherever you are watching this from. Welcome to Pigeon Healthy. Today we're going to talk about something that most pigeon keepers have never heard of, but it might just change the way you deal with parasites in your birds forever. Before we start, if you're new to this channel, this is where we talk about keeping pigeons healthy using completely natural methods. No chemicals, no synthetic medicines, just plants, herbs, and natural remedies that actually work. So if that sounds interesting to you, go ahead and subscribe, hit that notification bell, and let's get started. Today's plant is called wormwood. Now I know what you're thinking, wormwood. What kind of name is that? It sounds strange. It sounds old-fashioned. Maybe even a bit mysterious. This plant has been used for generations in traditional animal care. But somehow, in the world of modern pigeon keeping, it's been largely forgotten. And that's unfortunate because wormwood is one of the most researched natural antiparasitic plants available. Wormwood is not some exotic plant that you need to order from halfway across the world. It grows naturally in many parts of Europe, Asia, and North America. In Turkey, we call it pelinotu. You might have seen it growing wild on the side of the road, in abandoned fields, or even in your own backyard, and you just didn't know what it was. It's a silvery green plant with deeply divided leaves and a very strong bitter smell. And that smell is actually an indicator of the active compounds inside. The botanical name for wormwood is Artemisia absinthium. It belongs to the Asteraceae family, which also includes daisies, sunflowers, and many other common plants. Wormwood is a perennial herb, meaning it comes back year after year once established. It typically grows between 60 and 120 centimeters tall. The leaves are grayish-green because they're covered in fine, silky hairs, which give the plant its distinctive silvery appearance. The flowers are small, yellow, and appear in late summer. But for our purposes, we're interested in the leaves, which contain the highest concentration of active compounds. So let's talk about what wormwood actually does, and why it's effective against parasites. The main active compound in wormwood is called thujone. There are actually 2 forms of thujone, alpha thujone and beta thujone, and wormwood contains both. There are also other important compounds like absinthium, which is what gives wormwood its incredibly bitter taste, and artemisinin, which you might have heard of because it's used in antimalarial drugs. Then there are various flavonoids, phenolic acids, and other terpenes. Now don't worry, I'm not going to bore you with complicated chemistry. What you need to know is this. These compounds work together to create an anti-parasitic effect. Research has shown that these compounds can affect parasites in several ways. First, they interfere with the parasite's cell membranes. Think of a cell membrane as the outer wall of a house. If you damage that wall, everything inside becomes unstable. Second, they affect the parasite's nervous system. Many intestinal parasites have simple nerve structures, and the compounds in wormwood can disrupt their normal function, essentially paralyzing them. Third, some compounds have direct toxic effects on parasite reproduction, preventing them from multiplying. When you combine all these effects, you get a powerful natural anti-parasitic action. By day 5 to 7, you should see clear improvement. Droppings should be firming up and returning to normal consistency and color. They should be well-formed, not watery, with clear distinction between the fecal portion and the white urate cap. The urate should be chalky white, not yellow or green. Beyond the droppings, you should also notice behavioral and physical changes. Birds that were lethargic should become more active. They should show more interest in flying, moving around, and interacting with other birds. Appetite should improve. Birds that were pecking at food half-heartedly should start eating with enthusiasm. The feathers should start to look better, with more shine and smoothness rather than the rough, ruffled appearance that often accompanies parasitism. Weight is another important indicator. Parasitized birds typically lose weight or fail to gain weight properly. Once the parasites are under control, you should see weight stabilization within a few days, followed by gradual weight gain over the following 2 to 3 weeks. This is why weighing your birds regularly is so useful. A simple digital scale lets you track changes that might not be obvious just by looking at the bird. If you're doing regular fecal checks, either at home with a microscope or through a veterinarian, you should see a significant reduction in parasite egg counts within 7 to 10 days. The goal isn't necessarily to get to 0 eggs, which is nearly impossible in any pigeon loft, but to get the counts down to levels where the bird's immune systems can handle the remaining parasites without showing symptoms. Now, what if you don't see improvement after 7 to 10 days of treatment? There are several possibilities to consider. First, the parasite load might have been more severe than anticipated, requiring a longer or more intensive treatment approach. Second, there might be ongoing reinfection from the environment. If the loft is dirty, if droppings aren't being removed regularly, or if the loft is overcrowded, Birds can be continuously reinfected with parasites even as you're treating them. Third, the problem might not be parasites at all, or at least not only parasites. Other conditions like bacterial infections, viral diseases, or nutritional deficiencies can cause similar symptoms. And fourth, in some cases the parasites present might be species or strains that are less responsive to wormwood, requiring different interventions. This brings us to a critical point. Wormwood and other natural remedies work best as part of a comprehensive management approach, not as standalone solutions. You cannot rely on herbal treatments alone if your basic management practices are inadequate. Let me explain what I mean by comprehensive management. First and foremost is loft hygiene. Parasite eggs and oocysts are shed in droppings. If those droppings accumulate in the loft, they create a constant source of reinfection. Fresh droppings need to be removed daily if possible, or at minimum every other day. Perches should be scraped clean regularly. Nesting boxes should be cleaned between breeding rounds. The floor should be kept as dry as possible because many parasite stages require moisture to survive and develop. Good ventilation helps keep things dry and also reduces humidity, which further inhibits parasite development. Population density matters significantly. Overcrowding creates stress, and stress suppresses immune function. A stressed bird with a suppressed immune system is much more susceptible to parasite problems. Overcrowding also means more droppings in a smaller space, increasing infection pressure. Give your birds adequate space. The exact amount depends on breed and purpose, but as a general rule, racing and flying pigeons need more space than sedentary show breeds. Water quality is another key factor. Drinking water should be fresh and clean daily. Water containers should be positioned so birds can't defecate into them, because fecal contamination of water is a major route of parasite transmission. Wash water containers with hot water and a brush daily. Once a week, disinfect them with a dilute bleach solution or vinegar solution, then rinse thoroughly. Feed should be kept clean and dry. Feed containers should be designed so birds can't walk or sit in them. Spillage should be cleaned up promptly. Damp or moldy feed creates health problems beyond parasites. Store feed in sealed containers to prevent contamination by wild birds or rodents, which can introduce parasites. Stress management is important because stress directly affects immune function and parasite resistance. Minimize stress by maintaining consistent routines, avoiding sudden changes in diet or environment, providing adequate nutrition, and ensuring birds aren't harassed by predators or disturbed excessively. During particularly stressful times like racing season, breeding season, or molting, birds are more vulnerable to parasite problems and may need more frequent monitoring and prevention. Quarantine new birds. This is a practice many pigeon keepers skip, but it's important. Any new bird coming into your loft, whether purchased, received as a gift, or returning from a race or show, should be isolated for at least 2 to 3 weeks. During quarantine, observe the bird for any signs of illness, check their droppings, and ideally do a fecal test. This prevents introducing new parasite strains into your established flock. Let me address some common questions that come up regarding wormwood use. One question is whether wormwood can be used at the same time as chemical dewormers. The answer is yes, but with caution and proper timing. If you've recently used a pharmaceutical dewormer like fenbendazole, levamisole, or ivermectin, you should wait at least 2 weeks before introducing wormwood. The reason is that both chemical dewormers and herbal preparations are processed by the liver. Using them simultaneously or too close together can overload the liver's detoxification capacity. However, wormwood can be very useful as a follow-up treatment a few weeks after chemical deworming, or as a preventive treatment between chemical deworming cycles. This approach can actually help reduce the frequency of chemical treatments needed, which is beneficial for reducing the risk of parasite resistance. Another common question is about the range of effectiveness. What parasites does wormwood actually work against? Based on traditional use and available research, wormwood shows good effectiveness against intestinal roundworms, also called ascarids. These are among the most common parasites in pigeons. It also appears effective against capillaria, commonly called hairworms, which are thread-like worms that affect the intestinal lining. There's evidence of effectiveness against coccidia, which are protozoal parasites that cause coccidiosis, though the effect may be less pronounced than against worms. However, wormwood is not particularly effective against external parasites like feather mites, red mites, or lice. These require different approaches, often including physical treatments of the loft environment. Wormwood also has limited effectiveness against trichomoniasis, commonly called canker, which is caused by a protozoan and affects the throat and upper digestive tract. For canker, other herbs like oregano are more commonly used. People also ask about safety and potential side effects. Wormwood contains thujone, which in high doses can have neurotoxic effects. This is why absinthe, the alcoholic drink made from wormwood, was banned in many countries for years. However, the doses we're using for pigeons are much lower than the levels that cause toxicity. At recommended doses, wormwood is generally considered safe for pigeons. That said, monitor your birds when first introducing any new treatment. Watch for any unusual behavior, refusal to eat or drink, excessive sleepiness, or neurological signs like loss of balance or tremors. These would be signs of a problem. If you see any of these, discontinue the wormwood immediately and provide only fresh water. Also, as mentioned earlier, avoid use in very young squabs, laying hens, and already stressed or sick birds, and always follow recommended doses. More is not better, and excessive doses increase the risk of side effects. One of the advantages of using natural antiparasitics like wormwood is the reduced risk of resistance development. This is becoming an increasingly important consideration in animal health management. Resistance to pharmaceutical dewormers is a growing problem in livestock and poultry industries. When you use the same chemical dewormer repeatedly, you create selection pressure. Parasites that happen to have genetic traits that make them slightly less susceptible to that chemical survive and reproduce, passing on those resistance genes. Over time, the entire parasite population shifts toward resistance, and the dewormer becomes ineffective. Wormwood and other natural antiparasitics work differently. They contain multiple active compounds, not just one. These compounds work through different mechanisms simultaneously. For parasites to develop resistance to wormwood, they would need to develop resistance to multiple different compounds and multiple different mechanisms at the same time. This is much more difficult from an evolutionary standpoint. It's the difference between having to develop one key to open a lock versus having to develop 10 different keys to open 10 different locks simultaneously. This doesn't mean resistance can never develop to natural treatments, but it develops much more slowly and is less likely to become complete resistance. This makes natural antiparasitics valuable tools for long-term sustainable parasite management. By rotating between natural treatments and using chemical treatments only when necessary for severe infections, you can maintain effectiveness of all your tools for longer. When sourcing wormwood, quality really does matter. The concentration of active compounds varies depending on growing conditions, harvest timing, drying methods, and storage. High-quality dried wormwood should be grayish-green in color. If it's turned brown, it's likely old or was dried improperly, and the active compounds have degraded. The smell should be strong, pungent, and distinctly bitter. If there's little smell, the herb is old or was poor quality to begin with. If it smells musty or moldy, don't use it, as this indicates contamination. Store your dried wormwood in an airtight container in a cool, dark, dry place. Light, heat, and moisture all degrade the active compounds. Glass jars with tight lids work well. Avoid storing in plastic if possible, as some compounds can leach into plastic over time. Properly stored, good quality wormwood maintains its potency for about 1 year. After that, it gradually loses effectiveness. If you're growing your own wormwood, you have complete control over quality. The timing of harvest is important for maximizing active compounds. The highest concentrations occur just before the plant flowers, typically in mid to late summer in most climates. At this stage, the plant has built up its chemical defenses in preparation for flowering and seed production. Cut the stems about 10 centimeters above the ground. This allows the plant to regenerate. Bundle stems together with string or rubber bands in small bunches, about 5 to 7 stems per bunch. Small bunches dry more evenly and are less likely to develop mold. Hang these bunches upside down in a location that's warm, dry, well ventilated, and out of direct sunlight. An attic, a shed, or a covered porch often works well. Direct sunlight degrades some of the active compounds, so shade is important. Allow the bunches to hang for 1 to 2 weeks until completely dry. The leaves should be crispy and crumble easily. Once fully dry, strip the leaves from the stems. You can compost the stems or discard them. Store the dried leaves in jars as described above. To summarize everything we've covered, wormwood is a natural antiparasitic herb with documented traditional use in growing research support. It contains multiple active compounds including Pigeon, absinthium, and Artemisia that work together to affect intestinal parasites. It's most effective against roundworms, capillaria, and has moderate effectiveness against coccidia. It's prepared as an infusion by steeping dried leaves in hot water, then cooling and adding to drinking water. For prevention, use cycles of 3 days on, 11 days off, particularly during spring and autumn. For treatment of known parasite problems, use a slightly stronger solution for 7 consecutive days. Always take breaks between treatment periods. Use appropriate doses and avoid use in young squabs, laying hens, and stressed birds. Wormwood works best as part of a comprehensive approach that includes good loft hygiene, appropriate population density, clean water and feed, stress management, and regular monitoring. It's not a replacement for veterinary care in severe cases, but it's a valuable tool for prevention and management of mild to moderate parasite issues. It has the advantage of reduced resistance development compared to chemical dewormers. Quality of the herb matters, so source carefully and store properly. If you found this information useful, please give this video a thumbs up. It helps other pigeon keepers find this content. If you have questions or experiences to share about using wormwood or other natural treatments, leave them in the comments below. I read the comments and they help me understand what topics to cover in future videos. If you haven't subscribed to Pigeon Healthy yet, please do so and turn on notifications so you don't miss upcoming videos. We'll be covering many more natural health topics, herbal treatments, nutritional approaches, and practical management techniques for keeping pigeons healthy. Thank you for watching, and remember, healthy birds come from good management combined with thoughtful, appropriate interventions when needed. Take care of your birds, and I'll see you in the next video.